Hey everybody, welcome to Aggressive Progressives. I hope I don't have salad in my teeth. We got a great show, power pack show is happening today. We have a lot of great people on the show. Look who's with me, look who decided to come do the show. It's Steve-O. Hey, say hi, Steve-O.
Great to be back, Jimmy. I've been traveling the world too much.
I know you were in Oslo, right? And then where else have you been since Oslo?
Berlin.
Berlin? Wow, look at that. Okay, did you go see the statue of Edward Snowden in Berlin? They have one.
No, I didn't even know about that.
And yeah, they have him and Chelsea Manning and one other person. I'm not sure who it is.
Bill Cosby?
I think it is Bill Cosby. There's Malcolm Fleshner's here, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, Malcolm, how are you?
I'm delighted to be here, Jimmy. I'm excited. I don't think it's been a long time since the three of us were on, and I'm getting a little excited, I got to admit.
Well, I just want to, I'm excited. I'm almost as excited as when I got to meet Jude Law and popped a little man boner over him.
Oh, that's right, you're in love with Jude Law.
Of course I am.
Was that recent?
No, that's been forever. That guy's beautiful.
No, but recently you met him.
No, I did meet him in 2003. And that guy is prettier than you think. He is, and he's the kind of guy Jude Law, you go, I wonder how clothes would look on him. Like, I like to see him in linen. You know what I mean? Like one of those things.
Sure.
Like that's me. I don't know if you're like that, but he's
not really.
All right, so I don't know how we got off on that, but we're going to be talking with some great.
You did get off on it.
Oh, you guys are disgusting. So I don't have the list of people who are on the show today, but maybe it's over here. Okay, so we got a great show. James Cromwell is going to be on with Dennis Kucinich, and we're going to be talking about his activism against frack gas power plants in his home state and upstate New York. We tried to get him on before, and we got him on this week, so we're really excited about having James Cromwell, and Dennis Kucinich is coming up. By the way, Dennis Kucinich, super big truth teller. I can't wait to talk to him also.
That's why you never hear from him anymore.
That's why you never hear him.
Yeah.
No, you never hear from Dennis Kucinich, that's right. And we're also going to talk to David Hildebrand later. He's going to be running for Senate against Dianne Feinstein. Look at that.
Here in California.
Isn't that fantastic? So let's talk to him.
I mean, how's he going to run against Dianne Feinstein, who's such a super progressive and supports progressive values like Medicare for all and ending wars and all that sort of thing? What's his platform going to be? I'm interested to know what it will be. I'm interested to hear it because it doesn't make sense to me.
I don't think she actually is for those things, but we'll see.
What are you talking about? That's impossible. She's a Democrat, Jimmy.
She's a Democrat, which means single payer will never happen. So right now, I'm very excited to have back on the show this American journalist. He's a media critic. He's the author of a book called War Made Easy, How Presidents and Pundits Keep Spinning Us to Death. It was published in 2005. They also made a movie about it. That's right, a documentary based on War Made Easy was released in 2007. Is Norman Solomon here with us? He's here. Norman, are you there? Can I hear you?
Hi.
Oh, hi.
Howdy.
Oh, fantastic. Good to see you again. Thanks so much for making the time to talk to us. Now, you recently wrote an article in Truthdig about a couple of stories the New York Times have done. And first of all, before we get into that, could you just give me an overall, so in 2001, 2002, 2003, we ran the mainstream press really beat the drum for war. And they got us into, and I'm talking the Washington Post, I'm talking the New York Times, CNN, of course. Television journalism is horrible, but even our, papers of note, the Washington Post and the New York Times, were 100% for the war. They wrote 24 pro-war articles in the Washington Post. Do you see any kind of parallels, what's happening right now with the mainstream news media running with this Russia narrative?
Well, there's a tremendous amount of enthusiasm for, hey, you've got to spend a lot on the military contracting. You've got to have some big enemies to justify having a huge military budget. Yeah, it wasn't just, as you say, Fox News. It was not even New York Times and Washington Post, but especially the New York Times and Washington Post, because they helped set the agenda. And let's not leave out All Things Considered and Morning Edition on NPR, PBS NewsHour, and a lot of those same entities are really pushing now for how bad the Russians are and they're a threat to democracy, as though what happened on November 8th was really the fault of the Kremlin. It didn't have a lot to do with racism or structural injustice or making it harder for poor people to vote or purging hundreds of thousands of people from the voting rolls. No, it's all Vladimir Putin's fault. And you can see how convenient that is, and it also revs up the war machine.
Yeah. So, are you concerned about the What's in it for the Washington Post and the New York Times to keep doing this? Is it now?
Yeah.
When people ask me
for them, well, for starters, Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. As we know, he's about the richest person in the world, as the owner of Amazon, who also has just bought Whole Foods. I mean, this is all about a tremendous corporate investment in the military-industrial intelligence complex. Let's not forget that Amazon Web Services, owned by Jeff Bezos, signed a $600 million contract with the CIA for keeping that agency's info in its cloud. And Bezos said they're just getting started. Historically, the New York Times as well, look, they do some great journalism. They also have beat the drums for many, many wars, including the Vietnam War, the invasion of Iraq. They told us that Colin Powell at the UN at February 5th, 2003, was so impressive and laid aside a lot of doubts about the invasion. So this is in a historical context. And when you look at the Russians, you look at a tremendous psychological and political investment from the Clinton wing of the Democratic Party to say, oh, yeah, it's the Russians' fault that we lost. And in fact, if you look at the book Shattered, which came out a few weeks ago, written by two embedded journalists who followed the Clinton campaign, about 24 hours after that horrible election result last November, at the National Clinton headquarters, among some boxes where they brought in some pizza at their headquarters in Brooklyn, they decided, the book tells us, to blame Russia for the election result. So, hey, what's to lose? Plus, it gets the Bernie wing of the party off this topic. You know, it's so annoying when people talk about Wall Street, when people talk about how the Clinton wing of the party is enmeshed with the big banks and the profiteers and the billionaires. So, hey, changing the subject has been very useful for a lot of forces. Let's talk about Russia, Russia, Russia.
So Norman, let me ask you. So exactly how does it work? You know, I saw Phil Donahue recently. He was asked, did he think that the head of General Electric was calling the MSNBC during the war because Phil Donahue got fired because he was anti-Iraq war. And they asked him, do you think that the head of General Electric was talking to the head of MSNBC and telling them things? And he said yes. So
well, there's a memo. You know, fortunately, there was a leak of a memo from MSNBC before the war began. We don't want to have Phil Donahue on with these anti-war guests when the flag is going up. So we have a smoking gun memo. And this is about commercial interest. This is about trying to identify as network executives and as network programmers with the war makers, particularly in time of war. You know, there's a shocking sort of hyperbole coming out of many members of Congress, many Democrats, including Jackie Speer, who's a good congressperson generally from Silicon Valley, just about a day ago said that what the Russians did was, quote, an act of war. Can you get a grip on that? I mean, it is so insane and dangerous. Here we have two countries with 93% of the world's nuclear weapons between them. As you mentioned a few minutes ago, just in the last couple of days, you've got Russian and U.S. jets flying within a few feet of each other. And are we supposed to gamble the future of humanity of a nuclear holocaust? Because just like CEOs who think about the next couple of quarters, you've got these brilliant tacticians like Nancy Pelosi and the head of the DNC now, Tom Perez, thinking that it's a smart thing to run against Russia. Now, if you're in Wisconsin or Western Pennsylvania or Ohio, do you wake up in the morning and you're thinking about, oh, the Kremlin's really causing me a problem? Or do you think about health care for your family, education for your kids? This is an attempt to replicate exactly the mistakes that Hillary Clinton made when she ran against Putin last summer and fall, and you can see what good it did her.
So Jeff Bezos has actually admitted that he did direct his reporting team on how to cover the candidates in this last 2016 election. Do you think he's also instructing them how to cover this Russia story? Do you think that there's a connection?
You know, it's usually not that mechanistic. You know, you've got the owners who hire the editor-in-chief, in this case, Martin Barron at the Washington Post, and those top editors hire the sub-editors. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist or a political scientist to know that the people who are writing the editorials really would prefer to you cover it a certain way on the front page, which is actually one of the very most important opinion forums for media in the newspapers. The editorials are not called editorials. They're called news analysis or, very astute reporting on the front page. Yeah. And the couple of New York Times news stories that you mentioned that I've written about in the last few days really are examples where the spin to try to blame Bernie Sanders, insanely try to somehow lay this horrible shooting of the Republican congressman and a few of his colleagues at the baseball practice, to in some way lay that at the feet of pro-Bernie Sanders activists, is just irresponsible smear tactics. And let's face it, the New York Times, very hostile to the Clinton campaign, rather to the Bernie Sanders campaign. Same with the Washington Post. As a matter of fact, the Media Watch Group FAIR documented during the height of the Michigan primary campaign 16 negative stories in the Washington Post about Bernie Sanders in 16 hours. What does this have to do with the Russia issue? It has to do with the fact that so much of the news media, who understandably deplore and despise our current president, and I certainly think Trump is a horrible, dangerous president, but there's so much sympathy and support for Hillary Clinton and the political liberal interventionist policies that she advocates overseas, which is a euphemism for neocon. It's sort of like a democratic brand of neocon military interventionism. So to trash Bernie Sanders is a way to strengthen, unfortunately, the Clinton wing of the party. And that gets you back to blame Russia. Don't be talking about Wall Street, because Wall Street is supposed to be very cool and you're supposed to get along with Wall Street. That's called pragmatic, according to these media mavens.
So how does it work over at so can you break it down? How does it work at the New York Times? How does a story that's that egregiously and transparently just a smear job, that it's not, I mean, it was immediately called out by almost everybody in that doesn't work for the New York Times. It was called out as even people who worked for the Hillary Clinton campaign tweeted out that article saying they thought it was ridiculous. So how does a story like that get past an editor at the New York Times? How does that happen?
Well, the headlines, of course, are very important. So the editors not only approve the story, which, as you say, was extremely egregious, but also they approve the headline, which is part of the smear apparatus. One way that it's been facilitated and the journalistic impunity has been heightened at the New York Times is that about 3 weeks ago, the Times abolished a position called public editor, which is what they call the ombudsperson, where until 3 weeks ago, if readers had complaints and analysis and critiques of what was in the newspaper, they could go to the public editor, and the public editor could investigate and then write, and the Times would be compelled to publish an assessment, whether favorable or unfavorable. Well, that position is gone. As of the 1st of June, that position no longer exists. So that really smooths the glide path for this journalistic arrogance, and it happens. And, we see no retractions. The New York Times will put on page 2 of the print edition a correction if they spelled somebody's name wrong, if they got someone's middle initial incorrect, but they won't do any correction for an egregious smear job that they just put on their front page.
So I want to play, I don't know if, can you, I'm going to play some audio. I'm going to actually play video here. I don't know if you can see it, but you'll be able to hear it. This is David Brooks, who's a columnist for the New York Times. This was last Sunday on Meet the Press, and here he is responding, talking about the Russia issue and how it's being reported and what concerns him. So please give a listen to this.
You've heard all the interviews. David Brooks, do you have any better sense of where the president is this morning on this investigation?
I'm actually getting more uncomfortable with this whole deal, thinking that maybe we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. And I'm bothered by the lack of emerging evidence about the underlying crime, that there was actually collusion or coordination between the Trump White House. And so what's happened is we've surrounded the president with this legal minefield, and Donald Trump, being Donald Trump, steps all over the legal minefield and blows him up 6 ways from Sunday. But it's become an investigation about itself. And I've lived through Whitewater, I've lived through a lot of these, and there's a lot of shady behavior that don't rise to the Watergate level. And I'm just afraid we're being swallowed up by the politics of scandal when there's less and less evidence that they actually colluded. And maybe that'll come out, but so far it hasn't, and it bothers me.
So, Norman, what do you say to someone like David Brooks saying something like that?
Well, there's actually zero evidence of collusion. There's a lot of theories, but if theories could get people indicted, then I could have a theory about you and have you busted right now. I mean, it's supposed to be based on evidence. So collusion, there is no evidence. When it comes to Russian hacking and intrusion, yeah, you might plausibly think that there was some in digital cyber probe terms that some Russians did some probing. That doesn't mean that there was any quote unquote substantive interference in the election. As a matter of fact, Mark Warner, the Democratic senator from Virginia, who's the ranking minority member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, has said just in the last few days there is zero evidence that a single vote was changed by any cyber attack or hacking of any U.S. entity last year in connection with the November election. So there's no evidence that a single vote was changed. Now, RT took up about half, or at least a lot, of that January 6th report from James Clapper, who lied to Congress right before Snowden exposed that he had lied about the lack of supposed any surveillance from the NSA of U.S. citizens. This is the guy being cited. We hear again and again 17 intelligence agencies approved this report. The report, as Woody Guthrie said, was so thin, if it got any thinner, you could read a newspaper through it. There was virtually no there, and almost half of it was about RT. Now, you know how influential RT is with U.S. voters. You know how millions and millions of people who vote in the United States watch RT. But if we would remember, in 1996, Time magazine did a cover story bragging about how the U.S. helped get Boris Yeltsin elected as president of Russia. It's not to justify any sort of intervention or intrusion. It's just to say that with hardly any evidence to indicate any substantive Russian role in the election, this has been blown up for partisan reasons, for people who understandably are appalled and distressed and upset that we've got this horrible President Trump. But let's get a grip. Presidents of this country have talked to Russians, and it's sometimes been a good thing. That's called diplomacy. And there's been such a stigma attached to, quote, talking to Russians by Democrats that they're souping up not only a semi-neo-McCarthy era sort of thing, but a very dangerous pattern where we're not supposed to talk to Russians. We've got so many nuclear weapons pointed at them. They've got so many pointed at us. And there's this sort of terrible connotation that an American talked to a Russian. Where's this going to lead? Well, plausibly, it could lead to World War III. That's not alarmist. All you got to do is go to the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists website, take a look at their doomsday clock. January of this year, they moved it closer to apocalyptic midnight. And one reason those atomic scientists did that is because of the increasing tensions between Washington and Moscow. So I would say to those Democratic leaders and any Democrats or any Americans, get a grip. If you want to try to make political hay out of some theory about those bastions of honesty the CIA have told us about Russian intrusion, be my guest. If you want to increase the chances that your children or grandchildren won't live to old age because of a nuclear holocaust, go on and try to have some sort of a political payout for the Democrats, although I can't say it's worked very well so far at the polls.
Norman, I want to say thank you so much for taking time. We're out of time in this segment. Thanks so much. Everybody check out his article in Truthdig, and you can check out Norman's book, War Made Easy, How Presidents and Pundits Keep Spinning Us to Death. Thanks so much for your insights, and I really appreciate your writing and you being a media watchdog. The world needs more of you.
Hey, thanks a lot. Good talking with you.
Okay, so this ends the free portion of the show. When we come back, so if you want to see the rest of the show, we got almost another hour and 10 minutes of the show. So you go to tytnetwork.com/join. Go to tytnetwork.com/join. It's $10 a month. You get access to all the after shows, all the premium stuff. Plus you get access to this show every week, right? So you see the whole show. So go to tytnetwork.com/join. We'll be right back with more show after the break.